What's up, Infected, and welcome to the Quarantine. This is Kickstart Your Week. Now, if you're not familiar with what Kickstart Your Week is, this is my weekly segment where I cover new and interesting Kickstarters that have just recently hit Kickstarter within this past week. And I cover them, and it's entirely biased, and I choose the ones that catch my eye and that I thought looked cool. Now, with so many Kickstarters out there in so little time, I generally will only cut it down to a maximum of 10, regardless of how many really good ones are out there. Now, that is especially true for this week, because I had a hell of a time cutting it down to 10, so kind of spoilers, there are 10 on this list. Now, if you like my show here, check out the Gamerati. I have a link down in the description that'll take you directly to them. They are the only board game-centric curators on Kickstarter. Now, most of the time I've been doing here recently, been doing a podcast with them as well that comes out usually once a week, unless things happen and we can't record or anything, where we basically just talk about really cool and exciting Kickstarters that we had. We each choose one and we just kind of talk about why we think it's really cool. So it's kind of like this show, but a little more in depth but less games. So anyways, alright, first up we are going to have Terminator 2 the board game. Now, Terminator 2 the board game looks really interesting. It kind of looks like almost like an area control war style game where you have the AI, the game itself is running Skynet, and then all the players are cooperating as the humans trying to keep Skynet at bay while John Connor can get go down a path basically to where he creates the time machine and sends a Terminator back in time to protect the Terminator, or not Terminator, to protect him so he gets to that point. And it's basically what it is. So it's a clash between Skynet and the remnants of humanity, and it takes place entirely in the future war, which is really cool. I love the future war part of Terminator 2. And Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies, so this one definitely looks really cool, and it's got this interesting dice mechanic where you're trying to hack certain parts of the Skynet mainframe and try to deactivate them, so that way the Skynet the Skynet faction, I guess, because it's run by the game itself, where they start losing abilities, so it's easier for you to push things back, and it's got really cool minis like the big, I don't even know what it's called, but that giant walker thing that's got the guns and the big tank tread and that you see in the flash forwards, I guess. But I definitely wanted to add this one because I'm a sucker for Terminator. Next up on my list is Warpgate. Now, Warpgate is a sci-fi space-themed area control game that claims it's a fast-paced hand management area control game where you have this really cool big board that's built out of hexes and then little pieces that go around just to kind of close up the hexes so it looks like a kind of uniform little board, or big board for that matter. And you are playing cards out of your hand in order to spread your fleet around the board, and of course you want to control the most areas. And as you control planets, they give you special abilities. And the combat has an element of randomness to it, but it is a decision-making randomness, essentially. So you're going to draw two cards, and you get to choose one of those two to actually play. And your two cards come from your specific deck. So what it sounds like is each player is going to have their own deck that kind of accents their faction. It's a sci-fi game, so it's already almost a shoe-in for me. And then B, I tend to enjoy area control games, so you kind of slap those together. It sounds really, really cool. Next up is Resident Evil 2, the board game. Now this one, the moment it went on Kickstarter, I immediately backed it. Nostalgia alone sold me on this game. My first PlayStation 2 game that PlayStation 1 game that I ever played was Resident Evil 2. I, to this day, could still beat it, even though I haven't played it in probably, 8 years. I could still beat it in 2.5 hours with both Leon and Claire and get the secret characters, along with the special costumes and whole 9 yards. I've committed most of that game to memory, and I was a little iffy on backing it, and I watched their gameplay footage and whatnot. The game looks genuinely fun. It's a cooperative game. You're playing as, the base game comes with Claire Redfield, Leon Kennedy, Ada Wong, and the mayor, or not the mayor, the dude in the gun shop. I can't remember his name. And I think that's who it's supposed to be. I don't remember. But you start as as those four characters. But as the campaign's going on, they've unlocked, Cheryl Birkin, and which she's supposedly going to play a little differently because in the video game she couldn't use weapons. She had to just run around, but you can get into tight spots. And it's got an interesting little mechanic that at the end of every one of your turns and certain actions that you do, you have to flip over a card in the tension deck, which has most of them are all clear, everything's fine. But some of them have really bad cards in it. Then you have zombies and lickers and dogs or whatever all around. And certain rooms also have a like an alert level on them. So the first time anybody enters that room, you have to roll a die to see if something bad happens in there. And so you're going through all of that, and you have to get to depending on whatever scenario you're playing, you have to accomplish the goal, or essentially. And usually involves fighting a boss, and which usually involves fighting the G virus. God, why can't I remember his name? But I'm wanting to say William. I can't remember the guy's name. I had it in my mind right before recording, but of course I forgot it. But you have to fight him as the G virus, like the first stage, or depending on the scenario. Then once you beat that, you move on. Then if you're playing a campaign style, you keep your ammunition and move on to the next scenario, so you can play through effectively the entirety of Resident Evil 2 from the way I understand here, minus all the backtracking and stuff. And that I'm done. I backed it immediately. Next on the list is Fireteam Zero. Now, Fireteam Zero is a minis-based cooperative survival game, essentially. It looks like it's set in like World War II. Essentially, but it's got like an element of horror where rather than fighting, Germans or anything like that, you're fighting these monsters, and that just seems to be kind of in that era. And you're fighting these demons and monsters and stuff, trying to hack your way through and accomplish whatever objective. Now, there's lots of games like this. Some of them I've kickstarted and stuff like that. So I'm a little iffy on this, and this kind of game in general. Because they tend to either be really, really fun or fall flat on their face. But this one does look really nice. The artwork in it's really, really good. Minis are great. And overall, it looks like it has potential to be a really fun game. Next on the list is Trench. Now, Trench looks like basically a different form of chess, where you have your half the board and the other half the board, but rather than being a square, it's in a diamond. And it looks like chess meets Stratego, where on the bottom of your pieces that you have all around, they move in a very specific pattern. And from what it looks like, your opponent knows exactly what yours are. So you can always pull them up, look at the bottom, you can see how it moves and put it back down. But where the kicker is, it's supposed to mimic like World War II trench fighting. So you have a big line that goes across the middle of the board, and if one of your opponents are in it, you can't capture his piece from your side. You have to capture his piece from their side. So you have to go around and then back and then hit them from the rear, essentially behind their trench. And I thought that was a really interesting concept, and on top of everything, the whole game, the board, everything looks really sleek and streamlined, and it looks like one of those types of games, if you like Go, you like chess, you like, abstract games like that, this one's just going to be a shoe-in, and then it just looks pretty as hell as well. Next up on the list is Eloah Darkness. I think it's Eloah Darkness. Now, this one is a MOBA, essentially, as a board game. Now, I have Load. And I enjoy Load, and there's a big controversy around that, which I'm not going to touch. But with Eloah Darkness, it looks like a MOBA, or it is a MOBA, but instead it's card-based MOBA. So you're going to be, rather than all these expensive minis and all this stuff like Load, you're going to have a ton of cards, and you're going to build your deck based on, I guess, how you would like to play. So you're going to be, before the game starts, you're going to build it. And supposedly there's up to like 3,000 combinations of decks that you can make out of all the cards. And it's not like a CCG or an LCG or anything like that. Everything's in the box. So you make your deck, I make my deck. I don't know why I pointed backwards, but you get the idea. And you shuffle them, and you use that as a MOBA. So you're spawning these creeps, and you're moving your people around, and summoning heroes, and stuff like that. And interesting design, or an interesting mechanic. And I hate MOBA video games because the environment and the community is toxic. But in a board game, I do find them a lot more fun because I'm not playing with somebody who's quite as toxic. Next on the list is Seventh Continent, What Goes Up Must Come Down. Now, I own Seventh Continent down over here, and it is a fantastic, very story-driven game. Now, I've only played it 2 or 3 times, I think, maybe 3 or 4. And I am a little worried about replayability in the game, where you're going to know exactly what you need to do to finish the events, but your events are going to happen differently. Encounters you're going to have. So there is limited replayability, but don't expect it to be pretty much a whole new game every time you play it. But this one just adds more stuff, which always welcome to, I'm always welcome more stuff for Seventh Continent. But if you missed out on the Seventh Continent, this is your chance to hop on board the train, because it's pulling into the station. But if you already have it, there's a pledge level to just get the What Goes Up Must Come Down, which looks like it's, I guess you're in an air balloon, and you're trying to guide the air balloon in the right areas, so you have clouds, and so it just seems, it's just more Seventh Continent. It is really what it boils down to, which again, look, it's a phenomenal game. Next up is Dice Hospital. Now, Dice Hospital, I had a chance to demo this at Gen Con, but at the time we had gone like 16 hours without eating. Our feet were killing us. Everybody wanted, the group I was with, we all wanted to eat. I was also starving. My heartburn was acting up. I wasn't having a good time in general. And I was trying to get a hold of the designer and, hey, are you going to be running games later? Are you going to rerun them tomorrow? Whatever. And they were super busy, and I probably fell through the cracks. I didn't get a response back, unfortunately. But looking at the Kickstarter page, it does look really cool. It looks like it's a worker placement game, essentially, with dice. So you have these ambulance, and it's kind of, I thought of Dynamite Nurse right out of the gates, but totally different game. But you're going to roll dice, and then you're going to put them on these ambulance cards that you have out in the middle of the board, and the lower dice are going to go on the lowest numbers, and you're going to be higher numbers on higher ones. And then you're going to choose your turn order. So you can choose to go first, but you're going to take the lower number dice. And those are patients and their health. So the lower the little pips, the lower their health is. So now you're going first, but you have these really crappy dice that you have to cure, which are patients, essentially. So then you have workers in your hospital that you can build onto and give you more, more opportunities and more places you can put things. So you're moving your workers around, and they're activating the stations, which are allowing you to then cure your people. And the more, if you can, cure more people in a single round, then you get bonus points for the number. So, maybe you get, I didn't look super deep into it, but maybe, 1 point for curing person. But if you cure 2, you're going to get 3 points instead. Kind of that mechanic. So the more you can do in a single turn, the more points you're going to get versus just points for curing them. And then at the end of the game, who has the most points wins. And I love worker placement games, and this one looks very upbeat, very bubbly, but kind of a grim undertone because these people are dying. But it does look really, really good. I was a little bummed I didn't get to demo that at Gen Con. Next up is Ruby. Now, I've never seen, from what I understand, I guess it's an anime or a game or something. And Ruby, I know, is very popular. I've never gotten around to it. But the game itself looks solid. It's a co-op game where you have a boss that you have to fight, and you have the 4 characters from Ruby. And one player is going to square off against the boss, but the other players are supporting that player by keeping all of the ads essentially off of the person. They're playing cards from their hand, and the opponent, or the AI, is effectively flipping over other cards, and you're hoping you get the higher number, so your attack goes through first. And then you're doing that, and then it switches to another person. So you're all cooperatively trying to help each other and support each other, throw abilities towards each other, and overall support. From the little bit that I could tell, and I did a little bit of research on Ruby, it's meant to emulate the show And from the little bit I gathered, it does seem to do that. So if you're a fan of Ruby, definitely check this one out. Alright, and lastly we have Sukhumi. Now Sukhumi reminds me of a game by the name of Hiroshima Hex, which is a really good game. Where you have like this moon that's in the middle, and you have all these terrain pieces around, and then everybody has their headquarters on the outside. It's hex based, and the hexes have like red lines, or these big red triangles that come off of the flat edges. And those are basically like barricades. You can't enter that hex from that location. So it allows a very sleek, very just at a glance, I cannot move there kind of look to it. But then you have a bunch of different races, and you're all just warring. It's just giant area control battle, and it looks outstanding. The artwork looks really cool, and it looks very vivid. So like you can play with like Half-Life style bug looking things, and you're the hive and you play like a hive. Or you can play as like these war pigs that stand upright and are like anthropomorphic, I think is the word for it. Where they're these like boars, but they walk upright and they have tools and spears and like razor blades tied to sticks, very tribal looking, and you're all just trying to just jack each other up. Looks really cool. The combat looks really interesting, where the attacker gets to decide the outcome of the battle. And there's not a lot of detail on what this means, but their combat says the attacker gets to determine the outcome, but the defender gets to determine at what cost. So there's no luck involved in the game whatsoever from what they're declaring. So you're dropping this down, and I'm like, well, this is what the outcome is, and you're like, well, this is what you gotta pay for it, kind of thing. So it's like, you know, both parties are involved in the decision on how combat's gonna go. And rather than it being luck or anything like that, you're involved in the decision. And that really turned me on. And those are my 10 games for the week. Now, like I said earlier, definitely browse through the newest list on Kickstarter this week, because there are more than what I listed here. I had a hell of a time cutting it down to just 10. So yeah, there's a lot of really good games out there. I'm especially stoked for the Resident Evil game. I'm hoping it's good, but I'm a sucker for the IP. So definitely check out these games that I listed here and more. Check out all of them. They're all really look really solid. And as always, if you like my channel, you'd like to support me, I have a Patreon up here and down below. Any little bit helps and is definitely appreciated. If you're afraid of commitment, I do have a tip jar down here as well. It's a one-time donation. If you'd like to support the show, again, any amount helps. If not, that's cool too. Hit that subscribe button down there and just sit back and enjoy the show and enjoy the videos. All of it helps, and I definitely appreciate each and every one of you guys. Anyways, that wraps up Kickstart Your Week. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time in the quarantine.